Welcome to our Top Restored Leaders interview series. My name is Yurawel Deruin, founder and CEO at Intersectional Innovations Consulting. In the series, I will interview pioneers who embody what it means to be a restored leader. Working with others, a restored leader values trust, influence, buy-in, transparency, and clarity, all key elements for effective collaboration and growth. This is akin to the way a good gardening tool works in harmony with a gardener's experience and knowledge, completing their skills and enhancing their ability to care for the garden. In essence, a restored leader, much like a well-maintained gardening tool, is essential for cultivating a healthy, thriving, and productive environment where both the leader and their team can grow and flourish together.
So I wanted to first start by talking about power dynamics. And then, again, coming from this restorative, proactive, planting seeds and working and bringing things back to health perspective. When you are working with your clients, working in different spaces of community, what stands out to you most, and maybe this is even just personal, and why when you think about cultural issues, historical issues, and gender issues, where do you center a lot in discussing working on power dynamics?
Yeah, great question. When I first read that question, in preparation for our conversation today, I was focusing on historical issues. Mm-hmm. And, I think there's, it's like looking into the past helps us see into the future kind of a thing. You know what I mean? And so, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, that idea. And so I was focusing on the history aspect, but then I kind of shifted to the cultural. And let me explain what I mean. So yes, there's the continuum of time, and there's a historical perspective, and we're here right now in this moment, and then this will be in the past, in a little while, and that's cool and everything. But I think along that timeline, that history continuum, when it comes to human beings, at least, there's always been culture. There's always been the software of how we behave and interact with each other. And so I'm very fascinated with the historical aspect of it, also is how do we function, behave, what are our norms, what's accepted, what's not, because that really informs gender issues and, sexual orientation issues and race issues and fill in the blank issues. And so I really like to focus on, in my own work, the cultural aspect of an organization. So very quickly, in my work, I'll company X says, hey, we've got some challenges here, come in and help us, fix them, whatever. And oftentimes they'll say, we have a problem with X, racism, sexism, whatever it is. We want some training. We want to train everybody, and then the issue will be solved.
Yeah. As I was noodling on this question and kind of looking at the options that you put forward, they feel so interconnected and interdependent to me. And the piece that I decided to speak on here is cultural, right? Because I think the cultural issues bucket is the container that actually really influences so many of our systems and structures. And I like to think a lot about systems really being just a bunch of people repeatedly doing the same thing over and over again without question. And in that, those can be redesigned, right? But all those ways of being that we're so conditioned in, all those practices, all of our conditioned tendencies, right, are the things that make our culture and the things that make our systems. And so that was sort of the piece that kind of was bubbling up for me. I think, you just brought up sort of dominant culture and white dominant culture. And just in terms of approaching that from the cultural issue standpoint, I just think a lot about how that piece, that conditioning, is what perpetuates the inequities that we're often working so hard to dismantle. And a lot of the place where I do my work is leaning in with folks who are like, yeah, the way that we be and how we practice isn't actually aligned with what we say we want to be up to. How do we shift that? Right. And so it's both kind of visioning and designing towards what future can look like in a different state, but it's also actually the process by which we engage and build together that makes the change, right? Like, oh, there are so many other ways we can be in relationship and be in community and be in practice of making decisions, right? Of transforming power, right? A key liberatory design mindset, right? Seeking liberatory collaboration in terms of like, who can we bring in? How can we transform this? Who is underserved and needs more voice? And how can I actually seed power in order to give that? Right. And so, yeah, that's the jam. Working on cultural issues is the jam. It's like what I get up to do every day. Because I think it's actually where I think we learn a lot from the historical, obviously, and we have to keep that close and sacred for many reasons. I think definitely the gender issues, all of the, inequities that exist in all of that good conversation. Whew, it's rough. But I think it all backs up to this sort of cultural context and the interconnectedness of the ways we be.
Yeah, I think what stands out most for me is probably the historical issues. I think all three are very important, and I definitely see how they work together. I think that the historical issues set the context and lay the foundation for our cultural issues, our gender issues, and that we can't fully understand those other issues without acknowledging the history that created them, right? The situation that created them. So if you think about, for example, the current gendered issues of reproductive rights and bodily autonomy, I mean, so much history about where that even came from and the evolution of how laws have influenced morality, for example. Those things cannot be understood in isolation without the history. Even if you think about a restorative justice approach, you kind of have to go back to historically how people have sought healing and understand that that might be displaced in current society with all the development of technology. We become more and more individualistic as we get deeper into our technology and we're able to connect with people in a different way. And so how do we think about ideas of community from a historical context? And then we can build new digital communities that mirror the ways that we were able to heal in the past. So I definitely think studying the history helps us build a better future.
This is a great question, and the context that you just shared with me helps me better understand, the framing of the question. But I will definitely say that cultural issues stand out to me the most, and only because I feel that it encompasses the historical and gender issues at hand. I feel that cultural issues are informed by and inform gender-based issues and historical issues, whether they're past, present, or future, whatever that history may be. So I would definitely say that cultural issues stand out to me the most. And I feel that cultural issues, whether it be, gender-based violence or gender-based pay gaps, or whether it's racism or, sexism, disability issues or more, it affects everybody within our society, whether or not there are some people who believe that they are not impacted by some of these cultural issues, but as a larger society, we all interplay and we all are affected by these issues, whether or not we perceive ourselves to be. So I definitely all of the different topics, but it also ties in all of the different people, playing a role in our larger society and culture.
So I would love if you could just talk to us a little bit about what is your process for teaching others how to treat you? How do you set boundaries and communicate those thoughtfully, especially if you're thinking about your own needs to others?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is so important. I mean, in the work that I do, that you do, others, in our industry, if you will, in the big tent of DEI, boy, it's easy to burn out, right? We've got to find. Matter of fact, it's like in the last few years, one of my questions when I'm talking to, having conversations like this is just like you. How do you restore? How do you rest and refit and recharge? And for me, it's I really got to be a little selfish sometime with my time, right? I mean, because if you just give and give and give and give, you're going to run out of gas, and you'll be no good to yourself, to your loved ones, to your clients, to your network, to the folks that you work with. I think it's a good reminder that we re-acknowledge that no is a complete sentence, and it doesn't have to be delivered in an aggressive or disrespectful way, but it's okay to say no. And I'm not saying that we just jump off the cliff with no right away, but it's okay to say no. It's, I need to take a break. I need to pump the brakes a little bit. I need a rest. So it's okay to say no. And I do. So I hope others are also saying no when it's appropriate.
It feels super relevant. I'm a mother of a teenage girl. She's 15 and a half. She's the love of my life. And, am constantly in reflection and in conversation around, like, how do I support her to do this for herself? And what does that look like for her? Because she is not me. We are super different in lots of ways. And back to the somatic piece, I think, like, I think the piece around having, being able to set boundaries, but also being able to remain in connection it's a tender tension, and it's a really important one. So anyway, thank you for this thoughtful question. The thing that came up for me when I was noodling on this one is the idea that I really find that being clear is being caring in these kinds of relationships, right? I want to, as much as I can, and I'm like, whether I'm talking about my child or my partner or my clients or my homies, like whoever we're with, let me help us to spend less time guessing. Let's not guess what each other needs or wants. I mean, obviously, sometimes we don't know. That's a whole different ballgame. But if we do know, or if we have an offer to make or a request to make, can we be in that together? So just going back to, I find that being clear is being caring. And anytime I'm entering into a new client relationship, if we're talking about sort of projects and work and change work and design work, I often will sit with that. And before I even say yes to things, even this conversation, right? Asking myself, like, why? For the sake of what? What do I want to be in community around this? Like, what does it do for me? What can I offer? Not from like a selfish way necessarily, but just like an energetic way and a contribution way, like, in those pieces. And I try to think, like, what can I offer here? And what do I also need to request in order for me to show up as I need? And then I like to try to ask other folks that too, right? Especially if we're engaging on this long journey, what do you need for this collaboration or partnership? What can I do for you to help make sure that you're getting the coaching you need and you're able to have the real conversation here, right? Like, what does that look like for you? What does that need to feel like? In terms of what I request or share with folks in order to kind of set it up for success, I do have a few pretty concrete things that I've learned over the years. Sometimes they sound funny saying them out loud, but it like really helps me live my life. And I think I do better work because of it. People generally appreciate it. So I do share with folks that I do best with clarity and directness. Like, it's just what I need. I don't want to guess. I don't have the energy to guess. So, let's have a real conversation, and let's always do it with care. That is at the root, right? That we actually want to be better. So like, hey, if we need, like, hey, I know your pace is different than what this project is requiring, and I want to honor that and also get this done. What does it look like for us to remove some barriers so that this can happen, right? Like, how do we both do that? So just the real talk piece, clarity and directness. One thing I really ask of folks, like, man, I am super clear at this stage of my life, sort of what conditions fuel my creativity and my capacity to innovate or my capacity to hold hard conversations or whatever that is. And I have to protect my peace and my energy in those ways. So one of the things that I need is, my schedule's super dynamic. Like, as a mother, a partner, an entrepreneur, an innovator, I'm always doing something. And sometimes that means like me unavailable. And sometimes that means me holding a room of 100 people. And so I just need you to know a couple things, right? Like you need to get a hold of me quick, text me. You need to send me something long, email me. Know that I'm not going to get back to you in a few days if you email me. It just is what it is. But the other side of that is I'm always going to meet my deadlines. Like you're not going to catch me showing up unprepared. And that's sort of the way that I handle my business, right? And so also just requesting that of other folks. Like, let me know what you need. Let's honor what we say we're going to do. And it's going to be amazing.
Those are such good questions. I really had to reflect and think about boundaries and how they show up. But I think one way that I've seen other leaders do, and then I have also mirrored that, is by showing people very intentionally how I want to be treated by treating them a certain way. So, for example, if I want to be treated with respect, I go above and beyond to show respect to other people. But that also means that I'm learning. I'm looking at how other people are showing up, and I'm listening to what they're saying about how they want to be treated. So, the golden rule is to treat others how you want to be treated, but the platinum rule is to treat others how they want to be treated. So whenever I get the opportunity, I'm having those conversations. And I think some of the thoughtful communication comes from the assumption that people have well intentions. They are well intentioned in their actions. And so if someone is crossing a boundary, I am placing myself in their shoes and trying to consider that it is well-intentioned before I address it. So I am being direct still and firm, but I am, acknowledging that perhaps they did not mean any harm by it. So I think a really easy example is with meetings in corporate, especially. Meetings are just an easy place to set boundaries because you might get the opportunity to set the agenda, to create an introduction. It's also the chance for people to run over boundaries really easily, to, over talk you or interrupt you. And I think it is easy to take the time and pause and acknowledge what has happened and move on very smoothly, right? It doesn't have to be this whole drama production, but, I thank you for contributing your idea, and I appreciate that. But I was also in the middle of sharing something, and then you continue. And oftentimes people see that, oh, I interrupted them, and they don't tend to repeat that behavior. So I do try and, model how I would like to be treated. I do think about people as being well-intentioned and try to address any boundary settings with that in mind.
Yeah, this is a great question, and I have a real authentic answer to that. I will say that I love boundaries. I love the concept of boundaries. I love trying to implement boundaries, but I will say in my personal and professional life, I found that people may or may not respect them. So that is just a reality. And in my personal experiences, both personal and professional experiences, I have had people not respect my boundaries, no matter how thoughtfully, how mindfully, with how much kindness or compassion I've placed these boundaries. Some people just aren't able to perceive them or respect them for some reason or another. And in some cases, that is mental health conditions, both, at home and in the workplace. I've experienced, people being unable to respect my boundaries because of these conditions and other reasons as well. And I handle them a little bit differently. So I will share that in my personal life. I will try to implement boundaries by, stating what I need, doing so compassionately, and using very mindful language and being gentle, but firm in what I need. But sometimes people are unable to recognize those boundaries or follow through with them. And in my personal life, I've decided not to give up just yet. I'm definitely a person who, continues, to show up with consistency, with the same the same type of behavior, being kind and mindful and thoughtful and compassionate towards my loved ones, no matter how I might be treated by them. And I will share, over the past couple of decades that I've been practicing this, it has had a positive contribution towards my loved ones and towards our relationship. So I'm thankful for that, even though, I sometimes bear the brunt of, the boundary violation and all of those things. It's definitely impacted my life. My life is, personal life is kind of chaotic 24/7 because of that, but I hang in there because I have hope. And that's just the way I've decided to live my life, is not to give up on, my loved ones. In my professional work life, though, I feel like I have more freedom and options, and also the skills to set firmer boundaries in which, I can walk away if I need to. And I have had an experience where dealing with in a professional partnership where I've had to walk away from that partnership because of the way I was being treated and because of the violation of boundaries that I had set forth. And I want people to know that that's okay. Sometimes, that is what we have to do. And that is what I find myself doing more so in my professional life. Being able to set those firmer boundaries and being able to walk away if they're not respected. But again, in my personal life, things are just a little bit different, and I'm okay with that.
Our next question is about fun and DEI engagement. And I think we don't often hear those words together, but, something something I want people to walk away from is that, yes, sometimes there's energy drains and harm that you're resolving within this work. But it's also energizing when it's done right and you start to reach outcomes and live the behavior practices. It's energizing. But I think we're all looking for some of that, some inspiration and some fun, some playfulness. So I would love to hear how you incorporate fun and playful elements into not only work, but everyday life, especially if it comes down to building stronger relationships and trust with people.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit it so well. Fun and DEI. It's like, what? That never happens. It's uncomfortable. I don't want to be here. It's like, I don't, I'm a hostage in this, this training event as an example. And, I think, the thing I'm noticing is that it can be a lot of fun, but I think before you get to the fun part, it's going to have to be about being safe. And here's what I mean by that. It's like, because, I was this guy who wanted to have nothing to do with DEI engagement. No, not for me. Aren't those the programs for women and minorities? I'm an older white heterosexual man. Why am I here? This isn't for me. But really, I think that's a very thin and easily broken veneer for fear. For my own fear, my own apprehension, my own anxiety. And I've discovered that in other folks, regardless of who they look like or who they are, where they're from. And so I think it's like, acknowledging that there's maybe some anxiety and to kind of lessen the heat and the pressure in the room and start to get, build that psychological safety. You just can't say it's safe. You gotta work towards that. And then I think once you do that and you start to, people can start to like ask questions and they'll like exhale, and then now we can have some fun, because there's so many exercises and activities that really are revealing about ourselves and others. It can be a great amount of fun. And, but I think you gotta really be very careful and kind of get that population feeling that they're in a place where it's okay. You're going to be all right. You might make some mistakes and step on some toes, but we're going to forgive you and you can forgive me. And we can start to work to having a good engagement and really having some fun.
I'm stoked about the set of questions you gave me. I feel like you maybe read my diary to decide what to ask. So good work. I think I want to speak to the work piece first, just in terms of, I love seeing the headline of this question, fun and DEI, because I know so many folks don't actually find those two pieces in the same zone. And what I want to offer is, design thinking at its core is a creative problem-solving process that is anchored in human-centered needs, right? It's about problem finding. It's about unearthing what folks need, and really staying in the problem space for as long as you can so that you can really expand and depthfully understand what is the human need. And then from there, you can get creative. Well, to go deep, whether it's something, a deep equity topic, you often have to be in the practice of slowing down. You have to be in the practice of deep listening despite discomfort, despite wanting to respond, despite the, explosive feelings in your body that you might have. And then to get creative and to actually peel back the ceiling or the sky. I literally in my mind imagine like nothing up there. Anything is possible. And to cultivate that feeling actually requires different behavior too. And so one of the things that is super important, and if we ever get to be in a room together and I ever get to host a conversation with you, we will always do things, whether it's like quick improv or a quick something, we call them stokes often, to cultivate and activate the mindsets and even like the body feelings that you need to take into the next mode that we're working in, right? So if I'm asking folks in liberatory design to see the system, that requires sort of a not depth in that moment, but actually like a broad view, and to be able to almost scan and see interconnectedness, or even have hard conversations about what's the contributing factor holding this problem in place. Well, that might require me to do some centering with folks or some grounding or a way to like anchor so that people can have the bandwidth to look. Whereas if I want you to dream and you're always in this space of like operations or logistics or grounded, I'm going to do some stuff with you to like bring the levity and bring the energy. And like, man, you'd be surprised how much like contagious laughter allows for the ceiling to peel back on imagination. Right. And so, just kind of exclamation pointing the need to be intentional about setting the conditions for people to be in their bodies and in their minds in the ways that they need to in the scope of change.
Yes, I think play and fun is so important to like be able to bring joy to the things that you do. And as you said, I think right now the world is full of tension when you think about DEI, but a lot of the part of the D, the diversity, and the I, the inclusion, is celebrating differences and having a good time. I know that I've been involved with many celebrations where we are learning about each other's cultures. And I find that fun. And so I think a learning orientation can make almost anything fun. It could be very interesting for me to learn the music that you listen to or the food that you engage in, even learning things about your language or your religion. Like those things are enjoyable to me. And so I think those big cultural celebrations is a great way to incorporate fun in DEI. I love not only just the months, celebrating like the months, but even celebrating the days, the religious holidays, taking time to learn about those. I even think about how you incorporate play and fun at home. So gamifying anything with kids especially is a good time. I know my nephew, for example, I always used to be like, you want to go for a walk with me? And he'd be like, no, he wants to stay home and play his video game. And so I turned it into a game where first we have fun getting ready for the walk and, putting on the clothes, whatever it is, we're making a game out of it. And then when we go, we are making a game out of what we see. We're racing. We are, taking toys with us. And so I think about how do you translate that also to the workplace, which is where I focus a lot of my attention. And so my team has been thoughtful about intentionally setting up times of play. So, can we take a meeting where we're walking? Is it a walking meeting? It doesn't seem like play, but it is. It's light. It's outside. It is a time to like take things to a different level and free up your creativity even. We spend a lot of time getting to know each other, which I know everyone does not want to get to know coworkers, and that's okay boundary to have. But I think that there's some fun in that. Even if you want to make up an alternate life, it is a fun thing to share and relate to people in that way. So I often find that in general, fun moments are a way to increase bonding. But with DEI specifically, those fun moments enhance the aha moments that we want people to have. The learning and evolution that we're hoping that the work does, it comes through those light and playful moments.
Regarding fun and DEI, or how I try to incorporate fun in my personal professional life and my DEI practices, I will definitely say that humor is one of my favorite coping methods. I will say both in my professional and personal life, when it comes to practicing, the compassionate communication, the mindfulness, taking the restorative approach. I tend to use like silly humor amongst myself, and particularly with people I'm not in a stressful relationship with. And that helps me be able to restore myself, right? I'm able to make light of whatever stressful situation I'm in and be able to be energized a little bit rather than drained by the situation. And it just helps. So that playful, silly humor with people that I'm not in a stressful relationship in my personal and professional life, I find that to be very good. But again, I'm still, of course, mindful of my relationship. There's nothing that I'm poking fun at another person for or anything like that. It's just more of making light of my situation, right? Really pointing the humor back to myself. So that's one method that I use. And then when it comes to, incorporating fun and silliness into my relationships, both in my personal and professional life, where I might be in a stressful situation with somebody else, I find it definitely helps. So even if, we're in some type of dire, stressful situation where there might be some tension, whether it be a loved one or a colleague might have tension towards me or me towards them or whatever sort of combination of the two. I find that if we can still incorporate a little bit of silliness, just that little moment where we can laugh together or we can, take a collective sigh and kind of, laugh at the situation that we're in together, I find that definitely helps bridge the conflict or bridge the difference amongst ourselves. And I've actually seen this play out live when I'm on site in different international education programs. So for example, I'll just share a little bit. I've led students in different countries throughout Latin America, different student groups who, go to a different country to study there or have some sort of experiential education. And one thing that we do on these programs is we play a lot of games. And there are a lot of different individuals with different types of personalities and different perspectives and lived experiences. And there is definitely a lot of conflict in these groups. Not everybody gets along and not everybody wants to get along. But I always find that through playing these games and incorporating this silly, fun humor with one another, it starts to bridge the difference between them. So that is kind of like the purpose that we play these games. And I've seen people who, might be on complete opposite spectrums of perspective or opinion and still come together as really close allies in in these games and end up, having a deeper shared understanding of one another and fostering a more building, trusting relationship as time goes on. So yeah, I just wanted to share that little tidbit because I think it's important and I've seen it play out live.
I wanted to talk a little bit about these ideas that I think are both old and new buzzwords. So the ideas of authenticity versus cultural fit within organizations or groups in general. I specifically have heard so much of people, which are words that I have used for a long time and I believe in, around people being able to be authentic, being able to be them whole selves, to bring the experiences that make them who they are to the table that actually lead to more innovation. I've heard all of that so much more over in the last few years. But I think part of the disillusion and the letdown that many people are feeling, if not even the harm, is that when they get into the spaces, that's not true. You still are supposed to be a culture fit, right? And fit into what culture is already there, that has already been created before you. So I want to talk a little bit about this, what your perspective is on these ideas, and also how you see organizations having the opportunity to create cultures where employees are authentic, but we still are aligning with maybe what culture fit did for us, right? Like getting to outcomes or doing processes in a specific way.
Yeah. It's such a, when I thought about this one, and I almost went on like a little rant in my mind. Right? I find it wildly frustrating when an organization or a community tells their people, bring your whole selves, right? And then judge or diminish or reprimand or label folks for being unprofessional as they bring their whole selves. And I just don't feel it's a good practice, right? And the reason why I say that is like organizations are built to do a thing. Most of them run hierarchically. Most of them have a fit and a way of being that allows for them to be the thing they are. And they need alignment in order to do that thing because systems are built to do what they do, and they do that very well. So let's actually be clear that what you mean is bring your whole self that fits here, and the ways that we're communicating and signaling to you fit here, right? And I think, again, being clear is caring. So like if someone chooses to engage in that, whatever that is, which we all do, there are all things where we're like, okay, cool, I'm going to bring this slice of myself to this room, right? And it's a consensual thing, hopefully. Great. Now, in terms of like authenticity and culture fit and sort of in my leadership and as I steward other leaders to create the culture that will help them thrive, a design principle in my own life and in my own work, which you've probably gathered already, is that I fully believe that the more diverse and the more different, and I don't just mean racially, I mean like in all the practices, whether it's the ableism or the needs of home versus, some folks are like, I can't stand home, Zoom. And some people are like, I'm not going in if you pay me $1 million, right? Great. All are important, right? All are useful. And so I'm always like, yeah, the more folks that you can have at the table that have different needs and different requirements, the more you're going to create things together that work for more people because you have all those perspectives represented. So that's one. I'm like, I tell my clients, my people, myself, if you ever look around and everybody looks like you and everybody fits just the same, worry, especially if you're like the table of power, right? If you're the ones making decisions for everyone else, y'all don't have enough perspective and enough experience to be able to make choices for all these other folks that might not fit so neatly at this table.
Yeah, I think it's a very good spectrum that people have created such that these could be dichotomy, on one side or the other, but it really does not have to be that way. I think, though, this is such a new concept that organizations have not yet built a culture that allows for authenticity. So I will say what I'm saying is probably more on the theoretical side because you haven't seen this in large corporations because the idea just hasn't been around long enough. But in smaller organizations, in nonprofit world, you do see some of these things. But basically, a company culture should only include the most important things about the way that you work. It could also incorporate values, and then in that case, people can decide before they work if they align with those values or not. But for the most part, ways of working should not be defining who you are, right? They should be complementary. So ways of working, such as being respectful, being curious, or being a culture of learning, being accountable, or, having the overall feeling of accountability within the culture, adaptability, maybe an emphasis on leadership. All of those things should not be contradicting with who you are, in the sense of, whether you're an introvert or extrovert, or whether how you wear your hair, or your cultural holidays, your cultural religion, even your informal ways of talking. None of those things should be clashing against one another. So the culture has to be built on things that are about the way that you are working. And then, of course, there has to be some incorporation of the ability to celebrate your individualism, or the diversity amongst our employees. And, celebrating diversity doesn't also mean we can't celebrate as a group, right? If you think about sports teams, for example, you all love the same team. You might love the same university, but we know that each fan individually is very different and comes from a different place, a different space. And so you could think about corporations as that, like, we all have this shared goal and we can get there in the way that we work and sharing that in particular, but that doesn't mean we don't have our individuality to maintain.
I will say that the term culture fit has always been one that is a little bit problematic for me, I guess, in my opinion, because I've seen and read and, helped create some materials on this concept of culture fit and how it can contribute towards biases, especially in the recruitment or the hiring process. And even when someone is already hired and they're a newer part of the team, and if they don't quite belong or fit in, then, it can lead to some sort of retaliation or exclusion from the culture within the workplace. I personally think that the culture fit idea is a bit problematic. But regarding authenticity, I do think that that's a term that I appreciate and I want to see incorporated more in the workplace. And I think that authenticity really means allowing someone to show up as their whole self without fear of repercussion. Of course, so long as it's in an appropriate way, whatever that may mean. I don't think that authenticity can allow or excuse somebody to show up and be harmful in the workplace, if that makes sense. Because I do know that sometimes, what's the best way to say this? I do know that sometimes some concepts such as authenticity or inclusion might be weaponized to allow people to bring in really harmful behavior or ideologies into the workplace, or how they interact with their work or with other people that they work with. So I do want to be a bit mindful as we're talking about this. I wanted to flag that because I know that, it could happen and it may already be happening. But I do think it's important to allow people to show up as their whole selves at work. And that could include, the intersectionality of their identities and their lived experiences and their realities, which all vary so much. And every company is different. Every company may have a different preference in how they run. However, I lean personally more towards favoring companies that don't really have a lot of policies around how people should behave, how people should do their work, how people should interact with the people that they work with, because I find that is, a surefire way to allow people to show up as their whole authentic selves. When companies don't police what people are doing with their personal lives and how they get their work done and how they interact with others, I find that that is what allows people to show up the most authentic, as their most authentic selves. And therefore it retains people who show up as their most authentic selves and also attracts people who are their most authentic selves. So therefore, it builds a culture of authenticity when companies don't have policies that, regulate what or who a person can be when at work, if that makes sense.
Okay, well, the last question for you and I to chat about today is around the idea of joy, leading from fun to joy. And something that I hope we can walk away from is thinking about what it means to get inspired from joy, how that brings energy. So if you could share with us the time in your life when you were the most alive and engaged, and who you were focused on in that moment. Was it about yourself, or were you engaging in something bigger? And what did that feel like for you?
Yeah, I can think of two examples, and I'll give you the first one. One is family, and the other is in the military. And there are, I hope I'm normal, not abnormal, and in the sense that I felt that I had a lot of really good leaders while I was while I was growing up in the military. I like to use that phraseology. And when I have had opportunities where I've had really good leaders, and when I say good, I mean I felt welcomed on the team when I showed up. I was valued for the contributions that I provided for our team. I was respected for who I was, and then I was heard by these various leaders when either I had an idea or a concern or something of that nature. And when I was on those teams that were welcoming, respecting, valuing, and hearing, I knew I belonged. I was part of something bigger, and it was something that I had identity. I belonged on this, and I could trust my leader. I did trust my leader. And I knew I could go to my leader if I made a mistake and I screwed something up. I'm like, oh man, this is going to hurt. But you know what? I could go to my leader and I'd say, the best leaders would say, just don't lie to me. Just tell me what happened so I can deal with it, and we can figure it out. And it was those experiences with those leaders that you knew that if you made a mistake, not on purpose, you didn't, sabotage something, but you messed something up, you could go to them, and it was like they were going to work with you to resolve it so you wouldn't make that same mistake again. And then I think even the better leaders on top of that was like, and what did we learn about it now? And oh man, what a good place to be living and working in your life, when you're on a team like that. But again, it all depends on that leader. It's so important. The other one would be, my family. You're in your family, you're in your little tribe. It's your people, and it's a great experience. I hope everybody has those experiences where they feel there's love and connection and trust and respect, and with the people that you share blood with, and so yeah, that's good feelings.
I have so many things I could say. When I read this question, the thing that comes up for me is the concept of Stoke, right? Which I talked about a little bit earlier. And I, a few years back, did like a whole fellowship and research project and created a bunch of tools and an experience around Stoke and how to cultivate Stoke and why it's actually really critical for humans to human, right? To like be our best humans, we actually have a requirement of like finding this ebb and flow of Stoke, which I really define as this sort of interesting interplay and intersection between like something you're interested and hyped on that you actually have a little bit of skill at, but there's like far more to aspire to. And so you just have this both like forward motion and anticipatory, like, ooh, right? Like you're not going in like, I got this. It's kind of like, ooh, right? And that feeling is like that. It's not quite like cognitive dissonance. It's just, it's like, you almost get the wah-wahs, right? Like this feeling of like, ooh, am I doing it? Am I doing it? And on a really concrete level, like I feel that when I snowboard or when I surf or when I travel internationally and I'm like, okay, I did everything that I can do. And then I'm going to land in this zone and be like, okay, what is it really? Right? I feel that feeling when I know, like when I make the decision to level up in some way or like engage in a new context. Yeah, it's that. And then I think, in terms of just joy, the things I have both had so much loss in my life, like back to the grief piece, and also so much abundance and like so much love. And I think at that level, like you know, my loved ones bring me so much joy. My daughter is just like the jam. Um, and then even down to, it takes me back to the piece around grounding. Like joy can feel really expansive. And sometimes that's what I need in order to like do the thing. But more often than not, actually, it can feel simple. It can be like sitting on the ground outside with my dogs and just like finding myself laughing because they're snuggly and hilarious. And I'm, like that where you're like, you didn't mean to laugh. You didn't have an agenda for it, but you're actually rolling on the ground, cracking up. And that feels good, right? And sometimes it's like, my husband's this amazing green thumb. He's like off the hook with the garden business. Not me. I grow humans. He grows gardens. But going out and like noticing how the plants change every day or all the stuff that's going on, I'm like, wow, just that is like joy of being human, just the humanity of it all. That brings me joy.
Yes, that is a good question. I always feel like my work that I do is personally connected to something bigger than myself because I like to think that I do the work for people that are most marginalized in my community. But truly, I have examples ranging from, what it feels like to do something for the good of society, all the way down to just reflecting and being proud of myself and getting joy from that. I guess I'll start with myself, but I have been in school for most of my life because, you do your regular elementary, high school, went to undergrad, and then I went to grad school, and all of that takes an insane amount of time. So by the time I was in the workforce, I went to school a lot longer than most people, and my brain was just always at the forefront, and I was always busy and I didn't have time for hobbies. And so after my PhD, I said, you know what? I'm going to get a hobby. I'm just going to do something just to do it. I don't want any accomplishments. I don't want any goals. I just want to learn how to do something. And so I started these dance classes and I found such joy from moving my body because I think for so long it had been about what I could do with my brain. And I was never ever able to just let go and relax and enjoy. Everything was so cerebral. And so I found a whole lot of joy and it had nothing to do with anyone else. There was no expectations of society. It was just me and my version of art. And I think that's really important because I had lost a lot of that and being in such serious work. But I do think that most of my joy comes from working with others and something much bigger than myself. I find a lot of joy in sisterhood. I am a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and all of the work that we do together is focused on making the community better, but we also focus a lot on loving on each other and celebrating each other and having fun. One of the members created the Black Girl Day of Play, and it is an amazing day where you just get together and literally play games and have fun and fellowship. And I so admire what she created there because I don't think that we, like we talked about earlier, create enough time for play and just fun. And so we do wonderful things for our community. We promote scholarship by sending kids to college and teaching them about college. And we do voting registration drives. And there's lists and lists of things that we do. But the sisterhood part of it also brings me a lot of joy. And I can't forget that. My good friend, Courtney McClooney, likes to emphasize we shouldn't only think about self-care. There's also community care. So there's these things that we do as a community to find joy and to heal each other. And that is part of those things that we do. I really think also that the school I come from, I know a lot of people have a lot of love for their school. I went to the illustrious Tuskegee University, and I love my school. And so anything that I do with my folks, with my people, is so much fun. And again, a lot of it's so community based. I learn a lot from those people, but I'm so rewarded from the things that we're able to build together.
This is also a really great question. I had some time to, kind of reflect and think about it. And I will share that the time that I felt most alive and engaged with others was the time when I was acting as a family historian throughout Latin America, seeking my long lost family members and dealing with a lot of complex human beings and engaging with them and accepting them just exactly as they are. So that is when I felt most alive and the most engaged with other humans. Because it was a very fascinating experience. I got to sit down with one person who had one perspective and one lived experience about an event or about our family history or about, their relationship with others. And then I would go and see the other person who might be on the other, play a role in that story and also has their own perspective and their own lived experiences and their own opinions about, how our family history has rolled out. And I will say almost everybody in my family had a conflict with one another, and they had differing opinions and differing viewpoints and different traumas with, between one another. And for me to be, going and sitting with each individual, just as, as their whole selves and allowing them to share without me, sharing any opinion or, holding back any bias that I'm supposed to have towards them. It was a really good exercise for me seeing the bigger picture, the complexity of human beings and, the complex roles we play in our larger world and society. And it was a really good exercise in being able to see that, but also being able to understand the role that we play with one another. And accepting that, all humans, we are all good and bad. We are all multifaceted, and we all, are seen, differently by different people based on their own perspectives. That was a really illuminating time in my life, and it definitely has informed, again, the way I live my day to day in my personal life, but also in my professional life as well. That experience just really helped me move past a lot of internal biases or prejudices I might have had myself. Or fears, of prejudices that people might have towards me for all the different identities that I hold. That was a great time in my life just a couple of years ago, being able to hold all of these different people's experiences and stories and, accept them as their whole selves.
Thank you for watching. Please check out our upcoming Top Restored People Leader interviews. As always, stay connected and stay restored.